Hey Econ, it's time to get started. I can't be with you today because I am in sunny Florida. I am actually in Tampa, Florida, learning more about the Career Academies. So I'm at a National Career Academy conference and hoping to spend a little time by the water too. I'm hoping to start my day with a run by the water and maybe eat or see a sunset by the water as well. So I'll tell you all about it when I get back. But in the meantime, I want you to learn about how an economy grows. So remember, we have been talking about economic health or economic performance. And our focus has been, well, how do you measure the health of an economy? If you remember, we use the analogy of vital signs. Vital signs are to your health as economic indicators are to an economy. Our learning goal was I can identify and describe economic indicators in order to diagnose the current state of the economy. As I observed you in the class these last few days, I really feel like you're getting closer to being able to understand that goal. And so I want to press you a little bit further. If we are in times of recession or our economy is contracting, then what can we do as a society? What can our politicians do? What can government do or business people do to expand our economy? Because really, economic growth is our goal. Economic growth will increase our standard of living. There's an organization called the Heritage Foundation, and they work alongside with the Wall Street Journal every year, and they publish the Index of Economic Freedom. Every year they publish this, the findings are similar. Countries with the most economic freedom also have the highest rates of economic growth. So what is economic freedom? Economic freedom means that countries are able to provide low taxes, there's less government regulation. So think back to when we talked about economic systems with a command economy and how there were no true market economies, but there's those variations of mixed economies. So the less government regulation that there is, the more economic freedom there is. Countries with economic freedom have protection of property rights. They have the freedom of enterprise. Enterprise means business, so we have people that can own their own businesses. And then they also have a commitment to free trade. Well, why is this important? Well, it's important because when you have economic freedom, that is going to allow for your economy or your nation to be more wealthy. So why are some nations wealthy and why do we care? Well, we care because a nation's wealth affects the standard of living of its citizens. Standard of living means that that is the necessities and the luxuries that a group is provided, which indicate their level of comfort. When you don't have economic freedom or a high standard of living, that can bring on a lot of stress in your life, a lot of financial stress. I'm sure if you talk to your parents, they would say that what they want for your future is to have a high standard of living. So when we look at different nations, what explains those differences and why do some economies grow and some do not? I want you to take out that handout that I think you've been provided today called Mystery Nations. Look at those statistics and see if your group, so work in your table groups to see if your group can identify what the countries are. And if you can't identify them, that's okay. I purposely didn't provide you with the name of the country because I think that would probably skew your perspective. I really want you to focus on the statistics. So look at the different statistics and see if you can rank those countries from highest to lowest. So which one is possibly the richest country and which one is the poorest country. So Mrs. Bonshaw, this is where you'll pause the video and allow students some time to work on that. Okay, you're back. Here's the answers. Country E with Singapore as the richest country, and then country B, Japan, A, Argentina, D, Russia, and finally C, Nigeria. So take a look now at the different statistics. Compare my answers to yours. Which ones did you get right? Which ones didn't you get right? So think about how can some nations with few natural resources, like Japan and Singapore, actually be relatively wealthy? And think about how other nations with vast amounts of natural resources, such as Nigeria and Russia, be relatively poor. We know that natural resources do indeed contribute to economic success of nations like us in the United States, like South Africa. Think about the oil-rich nations in the Middle East, but there's also examples of nations such as Japan and Singapore that have achieved great economic success with relatively few natural resources. And some nations with stocks of natural resources, such as Nigeria and Russia, they actually remain relatively poor. So we know that there's other factors besides natural resources that contribute to long-term economic growth and to high levels of standard of living. And you see some of those in your handout, right? So take a look. What's high for Singapore and Japan that may not be as high for Russia and Nigeria? Those are the other factors. So pause the video again and have a discussion about what other factors besides natural resources that contribute to economic wealth. Okay, you're back. I'm hoping that you said some of these things, and this is what I really want you to jot down in your notes. Take a look at these keys to economic growth. High investment levels in human capital and physical capital. Physical capital is the machinery and equipment. Investment in human capital is the health of the citizens, the education level of the citizens, and the amount of training that we provide workers. Both of those contribute to long-term economic growth. Both are also related to the widespread use of new technologies, which often require new machinery and training of workers. Over the past 2 centuries, technological innovations have been one of the single most important determinants of economic growth. And that's followed closely by the investment in human capital and the investment in physical capital. Wealthier nations are usually in a better position to fund additional investments in both human and physical capital, but less developed nations often present other opportunities for new investments. For example, lower levels of income mean that labor costs are lower in those nations, and it's often possible to transfer new technologies and production methods from wealthier nations to the poorer nations. We also see that low inflation is a key to economic growth. So again, remember, mild inflation is good. If it goes too fast, our wages can't keep up, so that's not good. Political stability means a change in government won't cause any type of turmoil to its citizens' properties or to our confidence. So you think about one of our keys to economic growth right now, and whether or not we are going to be able to sustain as a country political stability when our new president is elected. Another key to economic growth is strong incentives to save, invest, and increase productivity. When we think about incentives, a lot of times that boils down to money. Like, is there money that I can keep or earn? The government might provide incentives by lowering taxes for us to try to encourage us to save, invest, or increase productivity. And then the last one is free trade. The high-income nations of the world are heavily involved in world trade. So they are involved in the imports and exports like Tricia and Scott talked to us about. The United States is one of the wealthiest nations in the world and one of the largest traders. Canada, Germany, the United Kingdom, Japan, France, Singapore, we're all involved or highly engaged in international trade. And trading leads to nations to specialize in the production of certain goods and services. And they typically can then produce at the lowest economic opportunity cost, which we talked about in Unit 1. So free trade is one of the last keys to economic growth. Remember, if you look at your essays, I'm going to ask you to write an essay, or a letter, I should say, to our next president, identifying to them what are the keys to economic growth. What do they need to focus on? These bullet points here is what I would like for you to mention and possibly describe in more detail. So again, it's technological innovation, investment in physical and human capital, greater economic freedom, low inflation, political stability, strong incentives to save, invest, and increase productivity, and free trade. I hope you have those items in your notes. Next, you're going to log into Google Classroom and you're going to watch another video that goes into more depth about how do you grow an economy. And you're going to do this through Edpuzzle. So remember, Edpuzzle will have you stop occasionally and answer a few questions. That is due before you walk into class tomorrow. Have a great afternoon, and I'll see you guys on Thursday.